Hey, you're back in the garage with TheEZGZ. Thank you all very much. I was just pleasantly surprised when I got up this morning and saw how many views I'd gotten on that video I posted yesterday. That is just shocking. That's probably a record for me. So I got a notice from CB or UPS or somebody that the parts left the building. So it's the weekend now, and it kind of motivates me because, hey, I'm going to be able to finish this thing. One of the big holdups is the oil pump pickup. There's no way I can even put the bottom part of the case together without putting in that pickup. So the other case half, I had opened up this window. This is a ventilation window that goes between the cylinders, and I'm just going to use a burr on an electric drill, and we'll see how it goes. Let me put you on the stand here, and sure, come on. I knew I could do that. So, and you want to face, whenever you're doing any of this kind of work, these filings are small, and you want to have your engine spotlessly clean when you build it or put it together. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I'm turning the case down like this so that I'm not going to be getting pieces of aluminum into my oil passages. When I opened up those crank oil holes, I was doing the same thing. And I should have been a dentist, you know? I just... And you know, if you are on a serious budget and can't afford a burr or don't have a drill, you could certainly use a rat tail file. And I'm feeling on the back side because there's actually, when they cast it, there's an impression back here, and it's quite large, and so it just, the metal didn't explode in. Okay, that's starting to look like a stock case, and this is how I arrived at this decision to do this, because even the older stock cases had a larger window there than what this did. And you just take your time and just do a good job. You can even use a carpenter's file, one of those 4-way files if you had to. I'm gonna grab a bigger file. I just happen to have a half-round file. I have a whole pile of files because my father, I got him when my father passed away. I don't know why he had so many, but of course back in the day they did a lot more of this stuff by hand. He didn't build engines. If you got any little ripples, this will help even them out. It's kind of hard to get a nice smooth flat finish, and they have different kinds of burrs and different kinds of tools. And if you have better tools, or maybe you put it in a milling machine and set it up at an angle, and you could just turn some cranks and wheels and do it like a CNC machine, you know. That would be great, but I don't have that. Most guys don't, but that shouldn't stop you from doing this and learning from it. I mean, you can read books and magazines about how to do anything, but eventually you just got to get in there and do it. I think this side's about done. I think we're about done, guys. And if you're using a drill with a steel chuck, be careful that you don't gouge up these finished surfaces here, because this is what's going to seat the bottom of your cylinders. And so just something to be aware of. This happens to be plastic, and I'm just kind of being cautious and going slow, but I think I'm satisfied with that. So I'm just going to get a little, let me just grab a paper towel here and wipe that out. I'd be cautious about using compressed air, simply because you don't want to blow all this stuff someplace where you don't want it to be. Yeah. Now here's an old oily rag, and you know, some of it's going to stick to that. A lot of it's going to stick to that. So yeah, just get that stuff out of there, and you know, now I can get some compressed air and blow a little bit. Made in Brazil, Autolina, CB Performance. Yeah, well, that little task is done with. This is the cam that I'm going to start off with on this build. It's a 2239 CB Performance cam. And there was an extra fee. You saw what I did to the FK7 to make it fit. I hand ground it. And checked it for clearance, so it was extra money to have them clearance this cam for the stroker build, and somebody had asked me in a comment, couldn't you just put it in a lathe? And it's probably what they did, but I doubt they used a lathe with a cutting bit. This is cast, and it just kind of looks to me like it was ground rather than cut with a bit. And so anyhow, that's the cam we're going to start with. And these are H-beam connecting rods, and I had taken this one apart just to look at the bearing, and I think on my last order I did get some Mall Cleveite bearings, and that's what I want to go with. The Cleveite bearings, a lot of guys thought those were the Chevy bearings, and but it is Mall, and it does say Mall / Cleveite, and they are a quality bearing. So I think that's what I'm going to go with. I've tried those Kubelschmidt bearings, and I've tried the stock bearings, and I've never really had a problem with any of them. I'm going to have to get 3/8 my ratchet, and I'll turn you back on here in a little bit. Oh, I was recording before. Okay, so this is an old Bentley book. It's a bus book. It's a 78, so it's got type 4 and type 1. And so I'm just going to go to my connecting rod section. I don't know where the cover is, sorry. And it says here, tells you where to take weight off, and it gives you your axial play. Here is what it describes. So it says 1/1000, 1.5 thousandths would be really good, 2/1000 would be good. A wear limit of 6 thousandths is the wear limit. So if you're rebuilding an engine, it tells you that, and that's why I like this book. The axial play side to side, it says it should be between 4 and 16 thousandths, and mine am at 16 thousandths, and you say, oh boy, that's at the limit. Don't be worried about that. It says that the wear limit is 27 thousandths. So, and when you anytime you're building a higher performance engine, I mention this every time that comes up, it's better to go on the loose side allow more clearance, because everything is flexing and moving. And just because this is an 82 stroke crank, so it's still using the stock main journal bearing sizes, 55. Some people get anal and they want to keep everything to the minimum standards, minimum on the mains, minimum on the wrist pins, minimum on everything, and it figures that, yeah, as it works in it, my engine will last longer. Well, you better be using really light oil. Don't be using no 2050 oil if you do that. I'm telling you that right now. You better be using, 10 weight oil and things like that. The lighter the oil, the better it lubricates. These heavy oils, I think a lot of people have, it's carryover from really old days, old times. And, yeah, that's got a little bit of wear, but it's nothing. And I don't see any big chunks of steel or anything in there. That's good. It's been running clean. I see a scratch here. But I don't see anything on the crankshaft journal. Now, always remember, on this type of a rod or any type of non-Volkswagen connecting rod, on a Volkswagen rod, they'll always tell you to put the little bump facing up. Well, when you arrange your crankshaft to drop in, they'll have it laid out. Let's see if there's yeah, it even shows it. So I'll get it laid out just like it shows in the picture, which it is right there, and it actually shows it like this. It bunches it up a little bit for you. Okay, this is how it shows you the picture in the book, and then it says, you know, you've got a bump here, and you've got a bump here, and a bump here, and a bump here. Well, in this case, it's going to be all they have a 1X on it, but what you'll notice is that the tang that holds the bearing in place is only on one side of the bearing, and you want that tang to be face down. And if on a stock Volkswagen, you may not have known this, but the reason they have that is because the connecting rods aren't straight. The connecting rods are 40 thousandths of an inch out of parallel. They're trying to bring this outside two cylinders in 40 thousandths, and they're trying to bring these two in 40 thousandths, so that the forces are, and the way it's centered on the wrist pin in the piston itself. And if you look at a piston, there's so many little details that, you know, you don't have to know this stuff, and you can get your engine and do it right. You notice on a piston there's always an arrow to point it to the flywheel. The reason is, if you look at the piston, if you just look down there, I can see it with my naked eye. The wrist pin isn't in the center. It's not in the center. It's offset to one side because it's an opposed cylinder horizontal engine, and it keeps the skirts from slapping and making noise. One of the old tricks that the Formula V guys would do is they would flip this around, and they thought they got less friction, but it was a noisier engine, but they were more interested in power than they were a little bit of noise. And that doesn't mean you should do this in your daily driver Volkswagen. You're never going to feel any difference doing that. I promise you that. And you'll notice that it's probably 1,000,000 degrees outside, but you can't move the wrist pin in here. This is typical. This is a forged Mahle piston, and I've never been able to move the wrist pin on new forged pistons. This thing is over 20 years old, and I still can't move it. On a cast piston, you'll be able to move it. When I'm assembling it, I always have to take a little bit of a flame from a butane torch and warm up the piston so that I can move this in, get my wrist pins, get everything lined up the way it's supposed to go. Just thought I'd share that with you. Just something you may notice during one of your builds. So, do I want to do this like agonizingly slow, one at a time? What am I going to do here? I don't want to mix this stuff up, and I want it to go on the same rods. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe what I should do is write on the rod and the cap with a pencil so that I know where it came from. So, whoop. Yeah, I'm going to go cylinder 1, or you could just put one line on it. Cylinder 2, you could go like this, or you could write the number 2. And I'm going to put a number sign, and that'll rub right off. It may rub off, but, you know, that way I know. And I'm going to put like a little circle around the 1X, so I know that that should face up. And then 2, and then this one would be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The number 4. And 1, 2, 3, the number 3. So this is going to take some time to do, and I'm not going to film it. And you guys, if you don't want some music to pass the time, I can speed up the video too, make it faster. But I want to go slow, and I might put one or two of these bearings in there and assemble it, and go on half torque and plastic gauge it to see what the clearance comes out to. And for those of you that don't know, you buy this plastic gauge. It comes in different colors, and it's a round piece of wax, and you tear off a piece. Here's all these little strips of wax. It's just that little strip of wax, but it's perfectly round, and when you put it on across the bearing, you don't want to move it around. You just want to lay it on there and then tighten it down. And I might move the crankshaft over to my crankshaft support, and then you squash it out. And these different widths of the plastic is what tells you what your tolerance are. So since I've got the time and the place and the stuff, I think we'll do that. Just for giggles, and why it takes so long to make a video, my neighbor, before he moved, found these Volkswagen connecting rods and some miscellaneous parts in his garage. So we were looking at these bearings, and here's a old Volkswagen bearing. This is a wore out bearing. It's gone down to the copper, and it feels quite thin, and no reflection on it, but you know, here's that little mark that we were talking about that normally goes on the side, and you'll note that the tang is down. So anytime you've got a aftermarket rod that doesn't have the mark on the side, just make sure you put the tangs to the bottom. And when I say the bottom, it's when your crankshaft is laid out exactly like I have it right here. I went to CB Performance's site, and what I did was I measured. I didn't even put the bolts in. I measured that with the old bearing in there, tapped it down, and it was 2,167 thousandths. And I went in there and put in 55 millimeters, and that is 265 thousandths. So that is right on the money. I think what I'm going to do is kind of build this right here on the table. Now, I told you on my last video, when putting in bearings, you want to be very careful how you handle these things, and never push them on the center. Never push them into place on the center. I suppose I could put quite a few threads in on both sides. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. It doesn't hurt to look at the back of the bearing as well. And this shows it's a standard bearing. I'm going to set that to the side. I've had bearings, and when I put it together, the rod wouldn't fall under its own weight, and I had to take it apart, and there was a little speck of something on the back side of the bearing. So when you're building this, I'm just going to show you on this first one. Like I said, you line up your tang and you push it in from the sides. These rod bearings are a lot thinner than the main bearings, and they're very fragile. You don't want to get them out of round, and you want to just push it down from the sides. And that's all there really is to it. Well, look at that tang. You know, I've said this, and you see me doing stuff all the time. It really, look for stuff. The factory mass produces this stuff, and they spot check things, but there's always things that slip through. And you're building your engine. You can take the time to do this sort of thing, right? Alright. Now, I'm going to line up our numbers. I'm going to plastic gauge this, and there's a little bit of oil on here right now. I kind of like to plastic gauge without the oil, and it helps it stick. What I have is a gland nut welded to my see it down there? Ooh, where is my zoom? That gland nut is just welded to the frame. So what I'll do is I'll bring my crankshaft over here. Man, if I keep taking this is going to be a long video if I record every little thing. But I know some people just want to see me do it, or they're getting ready to do one of theirs. Here's a piece. See, like right now, I should have music playing. This is boring. This is like watching paint dry. Oh, stay. Stay. Good dog. We're just going to go 20 pounds. Oop. What happened? I'm going to take it off. Seems crazy, doesn't it? Put it on, take it off. Okay. I don't know if it's showing up in the camera. There it is. There is my spot. Okay. There's our spot. That's pretty close to our of 1/1000th of an inch clearance. See that? And the spec on the book calls out The bearing clearance should be 0.0 millimeters, 8/10,000ths to 2.8. So I'm definitely in spec. I'm even on the tight side. So we have 16/1000ths axial back and forth and 1/1000th. So I'm going to repeat this procedure on the rest of these things. I'll put oil on it. I'm going to put just lightweight engine oil. I'm not putting assembly lube or nothing like that on there. And you have to clean the wax off, and you want to lubricate it completely, lubricate your bearing completely, put it on, and then go through your torquing procedure up to 30 pounds. And as was pointed out in a friendly way, and appreciate that, when you're using a torque wrench, try not to use extensions unless it's absolutely necessary, and only bring it out to the one click. And I'm not going to have enough memory card or battery if I take this much time and show you every one of these. So I'm just showing you how I measured it, and you got the general drift. And I didn't go to a full torque on that ARP bolt. I went to 20 pounds. The factory spec is 24, but I'm sure I got it closed enough to get this thing to squash and give me a reading. I read it with my dial caliper, and it showed the same thing, 1/1000th clearance, and that was without putting the cap bolts on there. That was measuring the old inside diameter with the old bearing in place. So I'm real happy with the way that is. I'm really happy with the nice finish that this thing's got. I just love it, love it, love it. And it's just as smooth can be. You look at a factory crankshaft, the later factory crankshafts, and they have long troughs where they oil the main bearings. But this has got the groove going around, and it's, you know, this is like this is just a beautiful crankshaft. I hate to tell you what I paid for this back in the day. I might be wrong, but it seems like it was a lot more than they're going for now. I noticed a lot of the brands of crankshafts that they have now don't have this oil groove in them, and this one was radiused on the edges, radiused as well as this was, you know, you can't even see it here, but I couldn't get the bearing back far enough, and I had to beat that tool I was telling you earlier in between here because that space wasn't enough. Because see, I've got that pushed back and there's still some space. That little bit of radiusing in the corner, that adds a lot more strength to this journal. I've been out in the dunes with on 2 different occasions with 2 different people that had 2276, and they broke their crankshaft, and I believe both of them, it wasn't when they were doing anything stupid, it was when we were just cruising along. It probably cracked, and then as we were cruising along, it broke the rest of the way. I got to get some cleaner and get this wax off of here. I already got it off the bearing, and then I'm going to put some oil on that right away, because it's amazing how quickly that you can get corrosion starting to form on stuff. So, okay. Hope that helps, guys. I hope this is what you want to see. And we're just going to move along here, and hopefully my heads will come 2 or 3 days, and we'll start getting serious about this thing, but at least I'll have my crank set up, right? Alright, so this seems like a long time has gone by, so I'm just going to call this like maybe a part 2, and put this up in sections rather than edit it completely out. I'll just maybe try to speed up some of the sections. I hope you didn't miss that out on anything too important. If you got questions, just ask them, and if anything, this is good documentation, verification that I am indeed doing the build myself, and I'm being careful, and I am struggling. It's been a while since I built a bottom end. No, yeah, because I took that 1800, I split the case, but I really didn't pull the crankshaft out. and last year is when I did that 1776 single port. So yeah, it's not like I do this day in, day out. So I have to think, and I have to get out the book, and I have to fumble around, and I have to find my tools just like everybody else. And I know you appreciate that. And there you go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subbing. TheEZGZ out.